Hello dear friends, welcome to this episode about religions. My name is Anthony and I welcome you all here. Welcome to this channel. I'm very proud to be here with you. Thank you for taking a look at this video. I'm going to be talking about religions tonight. I was asked some questions in relation to what are religions, who created religions, where do they originate from, but what do they truly represent? Where are these stories coming from? Why is there so many mistranslations in ancient texts? And why is this text called holy text? Why do we worship it so much? Where does worshiping come from? What are some mistranslations in the ancient text? What's the most important religion? What religion claims that they are the best religion? They're the chosen people. But why is this? I hope you enjoyed this episode tonight about religions and all the questions I will be answering in a minute. And I will see you again next time in another episode. Thank you for being here.
Who created religions in general? Whose idea was this in the first place?
Huge question, complex question, which would require more of a complex answer. But, you know, when you look at all of these religions, we have to really ask ourselves, where do they originate from? Where do they come from? What man created the first religion? Who saw his religion, then created the second, and then the third? And then how are they almost clones of one another? How are they just copying one another? And the unique thing always that you see today, at least in our generation, you see that everyone's claiming that their God is better than the other God and that they're the chosen people and everyone else is nothing, they're garbage, or that they're better than somebody else, or their prophet did more miracles. And all of these, I call them children Disney stories, or we can even call them ridiculous and lucid stories or stolen stories from ancient civilizations. But eventually it comes down to, why are there so many religions? And as you ask, who created them? So based on my own research, and I've done different anti-religious videos, not in a way of ever disrespecting a religion, because there's a lot of wonderful people out there, including my family members, that practice religion wonderfully. And I'm sure you know a lot of people too, neighbors, friends, colleagues, cousins, ex-boyfriends, lovers, these kind of things. The issue is, if we ask the religious person, where did your religion originate from? Who created it? Do you even know if this story is true? They'll never have the answer, because they're pre-equipped, conditioned, and almost brainwashed in a way to only repeat what the book says, the holy book, the holy text, or what the pastors say, imams say, priests say, what these temple leaders say, or rabbis, or whatever the domination is. The religions themselves, I would say there's approximately 15,100 religions today in the world, incorporated religions, sects, and cults. Some are smaller, some are bigger. And of course, we know about Islam, Christianity, Judaism, and these things. But majority of these religions, if we look at it back before this civilization that we're in now, so your ancestors and their ancestors, if we look at their civilizations long time ago, they predate Moses, predate Jesus, predate Allah and Mary and Magdalene and the apostles. If we go way back, what we see, there's a whole lot of different worshiping occurring. And this worshiping has to do with worshiping different energies that today you and I in English, in our primitive English, would say, these are very evil energies. These are very negative energies. And a lot of the religions worship planet Saturn, whether they wish to admit it or not admit it. Planet Saturn is what the Christianity, what Judaism, what Islam worships, which is the black cube, which is the peak or the bottom of the planet Saturn. And there's a lot of great speakers in the past that have actually done a lot of education on these things. Billy Carson is the one, Jordan Maxwell is another, Zecharia Sitchin and others. Why are there religions there? Well, they were created for a reason in conclusion. In my perspective, the best way to put it to you, they were created to control mankind, to imprison humanity, to tell you when you can and cannot be happy, what you can and cannot do, because if you don't do something that a tyrant or a prince or a king or a pope or a president or a leader says, you will be going to hell and you will need to pay them taxes to pray for you. So I think religion system is equivalent to checking yourself in this weekend into a mental asylum, some of these institutions to say, I am healthy and perfectly fine, but I'd like to be crazy and dumb. And then you go in and get indoctrinated by religions. It's a prison system and people should exit that cult, regardless of where they live or what they believe in.
Speaking of Billy Carson, Zecharia Sitchin, how much of their teachings are true and accurate?
Quite a lot. I happen to know Billy Carson, a wonderful gentleman, and I've been on his podcast or his network 4 different times with Roderick Martin, a dear friend of mine, who runs another podcast called Why the Big Secret. And we've discussed many different things, from reptilians, religion, lies of the religious text to ancient civilizations, Anunnakis. I've channeled live with Roderick Martin on Billy Carson's network. But, you know, over the years, you really cannot ignore what this gentleman is saying and what he's really done to do fascinating research over the years. And my opinion, definitely I would say Billy is one of the top researchers when it comes to mistranslations in the Bible, religious text, Anunnakis, the tablets, as far as Enlil, Enki, Jesus, Moses, all these things. Highly, I would recommend him for sure. His teachings and information is very accurate. As far as Zecharia Sitchin, right behind me, I have 12 of his books. I've done a lot of videos in the past on my own YouTube channel where I'm actually recommending books to people. So there's 6 different videos of top books 1, top books 2, top books 3, where I'm recommending 20 to 25 books per video to people, and I've highly recommended Zecharia Sitchin. Zecharia Sitchin, you know, he's a very wise man. He's passed now, of course. One of his, if we can call him a student, was Jordan Maxwell, and Jordan Maxwell was a genius. And one of the things people don't know about Zecharia Sitchin is that he had an encounter in his own house with an avatar version of what we would call a physical version of an extraterrestrial contact, and that being was a descendant of the original Anunnaki. So a lot of the Anunnaki material he's got, he didn't just pull it out of his bum and started writing nonsense as we see today across the industry. No, this gentleman definitely had a contact with a descendant of the Anunnaki. So I would also recommend his books, and in percentage, I would say about 70% of his research, of his books, particularly the 12th Planet, one of my favorite, yeah, it's accurate. The other 30, I would say it's slightly mistranslated.
What is your own explanation of God, God's word in the Bible, the Torah, and the Quran?
Well, when we look at these books, we look at this text, every religion will call their text the holy text, the best text, the greatest text, God's text, but they're misspeaking. They're not some dumb people, they're not arrogant people. I would just say that they are misled people. And I say this with all the respect. God to me is not a singular humanoid. No, so we cannot associate what God is based on what the Vatican says. I mean, Vatican lies more than the CNN and every other mainstream media. They're the ultimate liars, the ultimate Satanists. So when it comes to what the God is, I would desire to explain it my way. I would say, which is two-part of answer. The first answer is there was never the word God. The terminology was gods, G-O-D-S, but S was removed. And who were the gods who originally came from what the religion will say, the heavens? Out of space or off planet. Those were the Elohim and those were the Anunnaki. There was no such thing as a God that created everything. Imagine, if you can for a moment, if you can have an open mind, and imagine that you would think that a humanoid, one extraterrestrial male created every planet, every star, every solar system, every constellation, every galaxy, every universe. I think it's very, very ignorant to say that and very close-minded. So I would say that these were the gods. The God to me is a non-physical collective of some of the most extraordinarily advanced civilizations and extraterrestrial groups that create things just by thought. They wouldn't manually have to create a ship. They wouldn't manually have to create a river, a creek, a mountain, fish, a bear, a human, a cat. They create everything mentally. And one of the things I learned by dealing with draconian beings, particularly KALASK, I understand how they use their mind to simply destroy a planet or destroy a ship or shut down a ship or create something just by looking at it. That's the level of power these beings have mentally. We're not talking about physically, we're not talking about militarily, we're talking about mentally. So imagine you have a creator that created them. So who are these non-physical beings? We'll never know. But I think it's a collective of some of the most powerful, magnificent, non-physical groups that just go around the universe and start creating planets and life.
Jesus, his life, his death, his crucifixion. How much of his story that we hear today is true?
Well, in a very fair estimate, to be honest with you, I would say about 90 to 95% of everything we hear today, and not just as 2025 in the year that we're in, that our calendar says that we're in, but I say in your generation, in my generation, in your parents' generation, in my parents' generation. I was raised extremely religious, or both Orthodox Catholic and also Christian. So when we look at all of these things, I would say that definitely a very strong 90 to 95% is inaccurate. I would not say that it is a lie, and there's a very large difference between deception. If we start dissecting deception, misinformation, disinformation. Misinformation, if you hear something but it's partial truth, then the rest is just built on as a lie. Disinformation is absolutely made up fake agendas, right? So I would say that due to mistranslation of the ancient text, due to removal of the books and booklets and stories out of the original, what we would call Bible, I would say that due to theft of stories, actual events of stories from past civilizations, which Vatican says it's from the very recent time, 2,000 years ago, all of these things combined together, I would say that 90 to 95% stories about Jesus that we know as Jesus Christ are either fabricated, misunderstood, mistranslated, or made up. And I'll give you some examples if you want. So if we look at some of the translations that says Jesus walked on water, he never walked on water. That is a mistranslation of the sun's reflection in the evening time being on the water. If we look at a mistranslation again, that there were three kings upon his birth. No, that is the three stars of the Orion, which if you go outside right now, you'll be able to see them. So there's a lot of different mistranslations. For example, Joseph is not the real name of his father. The Mary is not the name of his mother. There are names, of course, but it's just that much later in time, these names started to be assigned. Was there a Michael down there? Was there a Peter down there? Was there an Oriel down there? Was there Jesus? These are made up names. They came in much, much later. Some people say his real name was Joshua. Joshua ben Joseph. Sure, fair enough. But the real name, we don't know. One of the most important things about Jesus is, you just mentioned it, and it's not to correct you, but the crucifixion. The crucifixion never happened. That is a radical fairy tale religious story. Even Islam knows this. It specifically says in the Quran that he was never crucified. It's just that Muslims call him Isa. They don't call him Jesus. The true rabbis, in Judaism, they really know the secret. That's why they don't call him the Son of God. Jewish people don't think he's the Son of God, and they know the real reason, because he was never crucified. And if you look at the Bible today, do we see his life anywhere in the late 20s or 30s? Where is it? What happened to it? Pages got lost? Of course, they were removed for a reason. One of the things that Jesus did, he taught levitation, he taught channeling, he taught a lot of different psychic skills for people to use. And because of that, he was disliked by that population. So he went to Tibet, he went to India, he went to Egypt to work with Thoth. He understood how the pyramids were built. He understood channeling, meaning telepathic communication. He was never crucified. He was just kicked out of that region. He lived on with his wife. He had 4 kids. They relocated to the Central Europe region and so forth. So the entire story of Jesus is absolutely made up. And lastly, not to bore you with the information, but you asked the question, if you ask an average person, who was Jesus? Where did these stories come from? How did he heal the blind man? All of these stories, all of them were absolutely made up. The story about the blind man is an Egyptian stolen story that predates Jesus. It is where Thoth healed Horus. So the version of description of the story compared to the biblical version of the story is absolutely identical. It's just the names were changed. So was he real? Yes, but we don't know his identity. And based on my research, based on a lot of different people that even you mentioned, such as Billy Carson or Jordan Maxwell and others, we know that there were 3 Jesuses before. One in the Indian, so the Krishna, second one Horus, and another one. So all of these stories is a repetitive story. Son of a virgin, died due to torture and crucifixion, had 12 buddies, the apostles, he did miracles, got crucified. No, the crucifixion was very real at that time, and even after in the Greeks, and then Romans perfected it, but he never got crucified. That is an absolute lie.
Can you touch on Moses and his parting of the Red Sea?
Yes, of course. So Red Sea is an inaccurate terminology, an accurate name. Vatican knows this, and Judaism knows the real truth. The real name of this sea, of this water, is Sea of Reeds. Because if you translate the terminology originally from the Hebrew, you'll be able to see there is no word that describes the color red. So Red Sea is inaccurate, and Vatican knows this, but unfortunately, as usual, they push their propaganda and agenda and brainwashing of the masses, the innocent masses, of course. So there was no Red Sea parting, it's Sea of the Reeds. Now, if we look at the Sea of the Reeds, or the Dead Sea, which is in those regions right now on the map. There's a lot of different seas. But to this day, and I can say this really with full confidence, and I've done a video on the Moses, there is no evidence to this day by any scholar, by any historian, that Moses even existed. There is no evidence of any kind. Where is Mount Sinai? There is no evidence today that he marched for 40 years. Was it 40 days? Maybe 40 weeks? Was it for 4 years? Was it for 14 years? Was it for 44 years? Was it 41 years? So everyone's just guessing and throwing things around. And often you see this in religions. People say Noah, who built the ark apparently, was 950 years. Was it maybe 952 years? How are you sure it's 950? Jesus was 33. Are you sure he wasn't 43? So what we see is a lot of misinformation and disinformation and fairy tale stories just told generation to generation to generation. So as I said, there's no evidence of the 40-year Moses' march of immigration march called Exodus, none whatsoever. If you ask any person today that is within that religion, say, do you have evidence in any of your museums? Is there web links, government websites? Did he really march for 40 years? Do you know where they marched? Was it through the water? Was it along the shores? Was it somewhere near Gaza? Where was it? No one knows. Everyone's just guessing. So to conclude this, there was no such thing as parting of the sea. The actual translation of that text, the real translation, is that there was no such thing as a storm. It's just that there was 40 days of very heavy rain. So 40 days of heavy rain is much different than 40 years of just walking through a desert. The second part that's mistranslated there is the burning bush. We're told that he came on a mountain, Mount Sinai that is, and there was a burning fire. That's also a mistranslation. The real text is that he encountered a ship, a UFO ship, which is an extraterrestrial ship, very often mentioned in the Bible and other holy texts as flying ships, flying fires, burning bushes. You see what the connection is? So it's completely mistranslated. And the third part is that he never existed in the way that he's described. Moses, that name is not correct, but what he was a sorcerer. He was a black magic sorcerer, and he had a cult. And because he had a cult, he went against the rules of that society, and he was kicked out with a small group of humans. And this had children, this had babies, this had adults, males and females, but that's all Moses was. The entire story is completely made up.
Noah's Ark, what's going on there? What's the real story there?
Nothing really happened there. I've done extensive research on that. I've looked at other researchers that really are, tunnel vision as far as ancient texts are concerned. They are depicting this boat that was flowing across the ocean, and Vatican loves always give us the fairy tale Disney stories. Of course, that's a very large mistranslation. Did the flood happen associated with Noah's Ark? Of course it did. There was 4 floods within our humanity or the human race. We're referring to the last one, the flood that happened. Absolutely, it was done to technology at that time that was misused by humans who had gifted extraterrestrial technology. And of course, as we've seen that today, geoengineering agendas still exist. Atlantis had them, hence they were sunk. So this storm that happened was real, and it was due to what we would refer today in our language, what we would call geoengineering agendas. So a very similar thing happened. There was no such thing as a Noah. There was the sons' names of Noah are names of villages and names of tribes at that time. It's just that the biblical text itself, these writings, they were mistranslated, so they thought it's a real person. And through channeling, I found extensive knowledge about what happened. This gentleman, Noah, was not even in the picture. What happened was it was a ship sent by the Zeta Reticuli, ordered by the Alpha Draconian Empire, in order to go and save some human specimen. Did they take some animals? Yes. Did they take a lot of humans? Oh yes. Different regions, what we would call today on a map, from Asia to Europe. And they took those humans, the flood happened, eventually when the water settled, they brought those humans back. That story never happened. It's a large lie.
We've all been told the very famous story of the origins of humanity, the Garden of Eden, Adam and Eve. What's your opinion on that?
I think that's a story that a lot of people really know the truth. It's just that they don't know the full truth. As far as the Garden of Eden is concerned, that is an Anunnaki lab. So Anunnaki is the hybrid beings who came from the Pleiades, which is a different subject, which stolen and smuggled draconian hybrid DNA. They hybridized themselves, came to this what we call a planet or this reality as they did at that time. They just raped and privileged and stole and pretty much treated us humans as a lab. So that Garden of Eden is not somewhere where Adam and Eve had sex. Of course, again, this is one of the most gullible stories. This was an Anunnaki lab where Anunnakis mistreated humans, did genetic tests on humans, and it was a very large cloning facility. This happened in the northern Iraq, where we would call today, as far as the map is concerned, a city called Dohuk. And Dohuk is a really large popular city in northern Iraq, so it's quite northern away from Baghdad. It's in that region. As far as Adam and Eve, the whole thing is comical. That's not the true name of these humans. Adam obviously did not create anything. The two sons that he had, I mean, they did have children, but they were there part of a large human civilization already. In fact, if you look at one of the mistranslations, is when one of his sons killed the other son, the Anunnaki looked at him and he said, "No, you got to be kicked out of here." And one of the things we can see in the biblical text today, he specifically says, "If you kick me out and I go out there, those people will kill me." Well, what people are you referring to if you and your brother, mom and dad, are the only humans alive today? So of course, humanity is much older than what biblical text says. The Adam and Eve is a made-up fairy tale. And lastly, I'll tell you, first I'll ask you this, next time you see Adam and Eve picture, why does the Eve have a belly button? And the second thing is, if we look at the rib story, the rib being removed, no, this is a mistranslation of the ancient text where Anunnaki were removing body parts of humans to clone them and test them, revising our DNA, inserting the worshiping gene. So the whole story is made up, and I've done a really big video, about 28-minute video, I think, on the Adam and Eve, exposing this entire hoax. Lastly, again, quickly, I'll mention the whole snake and the apple. Apple represents wisdom and knowledge. Snake represents wisdom, but the snake is a representation of Earth reptilians that at that time worked very closely with the Anunnaki. Earth reptilians was one of the largest populations at that time. Humans were not that big as far as population. We were just getting cloned. We were just being created. So that would be the answer to that question.
Was the Tower of Babel a real tower?
Towers. Add S to that. Towers. Those were towers, yes. Absolutely. Are they depicted the right way as far as a spiral that looked like a corn, almost a vegetable? No. They were large towers. We would perhaps compare them today to the Burj Al Khalifa tower in Dubai, or some of the large towers that we see across China, or even in Toronto, Ontario here, the CN Tower. They were very, very large towers, and I've seen it in my third eye. It was presented to me for me to see it in order for me to do my own video on it, which I've already released on my YouTube channel. The interesting thing with these towers is there were 3 towers in the front. So the one was right in the middle, and one was on each side but pulled back a little bit. So it created like an oval effect. And then there were 2 more behind. So a total of 5 towers. And those 5 towers were used as teleportation locations. They were used as landing ship locations, healing locations. And again, we're talking about cloning technology, cloning entities, cloning beings, and also production of ships. And because these humans, they were gifted this technology, they got too advanced, they got too smart. But what happens with that, which we've seen in Roman Empire, we've seen this as well as in the Atlantean or Atlantis, we've seen that people get arrogant. And when they get arrogant, the ETs who gave you that technology are now going to come and destroy it. And the biblical story is that God himself got mad at the local population for not understanding their language. And then he told them, leave the construction site, abandon the project, and then he destroyed the towers. Of course, we're talking about nonsense, and this is exactly how humans are brainwashed by religions. The towers did get destroyed. Oh, absolutely, they got destroyed, but they got destroyed by extraterrestrials. And in that destruction, unfortunately, a lot of humans have died. In my video, I mentioned the casualty rate. The casualty rate was between 10 to 30 million humans have died at that time. And the towers were approximately 18 to 25 kilometers tall. So these were huge towers. They were not built like we build them today, you know, in Toronto, New York, Miami, and that kind of stuff.
There are some powerful people in religion, popes, the Vatican. Can you shed some light on your opinion on?
Yeah, my opinion has always been the same, only because I really know the truth and not because I dislike a certain religion. Remember, I was raised very religious. I was an altar boy as a young boy. I mean, I went to private Christian school, and I come from a area where I learned quite a bit about Judaism, Islam, and Christianity at the same time. It was a multicultural region at the time. But in relation to the Vatican, first of all, we got to look at what these Satanists are doing, the rapists of children, the blood drinkers and worshippers. So the real black magic, the real stuff that happens downstairs, pedophilia, theft of children, and other things. And really, when it comes to the Vatican, no one can understand what happens there because they're going there blindly to ask for Jesus, to ask for Mary, to ask for God or angels for their sins to be forgiven, because people are not in the right mindset. They think because they do something in life, or they, let's say, break this glass here, and they say, oh, the demon, the devil did it, I am so bad, I got to go to my priest and ask for forgiveness. Like, people are brainwashed to think this. We're much more powerful than what the religions tell us, but they don't want us to unlock those keys. Vatican is just a factory of lies, factory of black magic, factory of human harvesting, so energy harvesting. So as long as you go there and you bow down to the Pope, and you put your hands together saying Amen, meaning Aman-Ra, one of the most psychopathic Egyptian gods, they want you to do that and be a good boy and a good girl, donate your money, give 10% of your income, and of course, feed them the energy, the real energy. And this is the misinformation in the industry. People say Draco collects human energy. This is completely inaccurate. Draco is not even present on Earth. You know how far dimensionally they are? It is the psychopaths here on Earth we call priests, and we call imams, and we call pastors. So those are the real psychopaths. That's pure evil, and those are the real demons.
What is your idea of the purest form of religion?
Every religion has mistranslations. Every single religion has a mistranslation. There's always a mistranslation. I would definitely say, if I was to be religious, it would be Eastern European Orthodox, Russian, whether it's Serbian, whether it's Bulgarian, whether it's Romanian, absolutely. And I think they have the purest, the most loving, the most benevolent, the most kindest, the most patriotic level of Christianity. And I always see the beautiful nature, the humbleness within them when they talk about God and religion, and the love for their land, the love for their mother. And there's never any arrogance or anything like that. So I would say it's the Eastern European Orthodox religion would be the purest in my perspective.